Greetings to everyone. We are going to learn introduction to modern prose. Prose has of course always existed as means of defining non-metrical writing. So prose means we know that they are essays, paragraphs. Prose always gives us some stories. We are going to learn some stories from prose. It assumed particular importance in the early modern period. It was considered important in the early modern period, which led an exponential increase in the number of works produced in English. Many of these were in prose, the most widespread and straightforward mode of writing, because authors from greater range of social backgrounds now had access to the public space. The early modern period, especially after the advent of British Civil War, witnessed the advent of news books and news writing. A key category that defines most people's understanding of print cultures today. The period also saw major advances in science that were disseminated in prose for large to satisfy for large audiences. Other form of prose writing also emerged in this period. An experiment in writing that was closely linked to autobiography. Prose can be conceived in two interrelated ways. First, as a form of writing, and a series of subjects that are represented in the prose. Either way, the category straddles the divide between fiction and non-fiction. Now we are going to give a definition for modern prose. The origin of modern prose style was the subject of scholarly debate in the first half of the 20th century. Today, few are saying that, especially restoration specialist or historian of rhetoric, are they define that to recall the terms of the debate between Maurice B. Crowell and Richard Foster Jones are their successors. And yet, prose style has once again become an important focus of work in literary studies. After decades in which literary study has been dominated by contextual hermeneutics, it seems possible once again to think about literary change in formal terms. As Moratti has notably argued, for me, formal analysis is the great accomplishment of literary study and is therefore also what a new approach, quantitative, digital, evolutionary, whatever, must prove itself against. The aim of this work is to recover a crucial episode in the historical conceptualization of style and thus to restore the emergence of modern prose to its key position in our understanding of English literary theory. The unsolved inquiry began by Krall and Jones set out from the manifest difference of modern prose form, its renaissance and medieval antecedents. As a subset of language change, the development of prose style has its own set of complex determinations. All prose to stipulate is the sum of stylistic features determined by the familiar set of conceptual operators, form, genre, author, period, literary fashion, and perhaps others as yet unspecified. But prose, as such, is purely conceptual entity. It functions as a kind of raw material for compositions, seemingly undermined with regard to content and yet constrained by convention of grammar and usage. English prose style in the later 17th century was a result of the anti-Caesarean movement, which was correlated with a reorientation of the general system that privileged the forms of essay treatise over the form of oratory. Although both Kroll and Jones grasp aspect of transformation of prose, their casual hypothesis failed to demonstrate a definite mechanism of change that would explain the syntax and diction we recognize as modern. New developments in the discourse of prose style betray the recognition of prose avant-la letters as a medium. This recognition was more preciously recognition in the sense that the plain style was understood as a new kind of prose rather than an intrusion about the nature of prose itself. Composition in the prose continued for some time to be described in rhetorical terms because no other technical lexicon was yet available. The importance of the lexical overhang has consequences that extend into the present. In the story, oratory is more important than narrative. The fact we never encounter any prose that is not generically or formally marked means that prose is always somewhere behind its manifestation, of which narrative is only one. Prose is any speech or writing that is not verse. Yet prose first appeared in ancient Greece in the rarefied form of an art, rhetoric, complementary to the art of poetry. The first rhetoricians called the object of their art persuasive speech. Walter Hahn calls an oral recite for as long as oratoric occupied the highest place in the hierarchy of prose genre. Kitte and Godze see in this prose an irreversible movement away from the didactic situation of the French jongleurs who recited their vernacular verses, thus rooting their composition in a single time and place of performance. French narrative prose, by contrast, whether chronicle or fictions, displaced this dixis to purely textual speech in which Kitte and Gorsic see the appearance of new signifying practice that is highly versatile and pulls together any number of discourses in its web, in short, the birth of modern prose. That this moment of transition, which is linked to the privileged instance of narrative, fully comprehends the possibility of prose in modernity seems unlikely to me, although where one stands on these questions depends on how one defines modernity. In any correlations of prose with modernity, these two terms will define each other. The emergence of prose in the 17th century is possibly the last of a series beginning in Greek antiquity. Setting aside casual explanation proposed for the marked change in prose style during the latter 17th century, what emerges in urgent polemic for the plain style is a recognition of prose itself as a medium of composition. This intuition about the nature of prose had the uninvented effect of liberating prose from its immemorial subordination to the system of rhetoric and opening up new possibilities for its exploitations as mean of communication. Now we are going to learn about the characteristics of modernistic literature. There are many distinctive characteristics of modernistic literature. The following is a list of main characteristics of the modernist literature movement. Commonly written in first person perspective, focus on inner working of the characters and their consequences of themes of negative consequences of capitalism and machinery, themes of isolation and individualism, tones that center around the absurdity of society, formalism of language, presence of symbolism. Modernism was a reflection of the rapidly changing world that the people of time were experiencing. With industrialism and the development of technology aided capitalism, the workforce began to shift. The shift in ideals and priorities led to a reflection of values that were seen in the themes of modernistic literature. These themes focus on cold machinery, the evils of capitalism, and the effect this concept have on people. Irony and satire further displayed these contrasting areas. The characteristics of modernistic literature reflected the sociological changes and the effect they had on people. Finally, as a summary, modernism was a literary movement that lasted from the late 19th century to around the mid 20th century. and encapsulated a series of versioning writing techniques that influence the course of literary theory. Thank you.